let's go ahead and get back onto some more positive news, and that's the revival of the Scout brand. This is kind of neat and something I've been looking forward to seeing for a while when I heard that they were going to be bringing this brand back. Now, if you're not familiar, Scout was a 1960s to on up into the 70s, a brand that built trucks. And if you're probably more familiar with the International brand, that's who made Scout. It was their answer to Jeep because Jeep was getting pretty popular among the civilian crowd. And the first vehicle they built was the Scout 80, and it was a pickup truck. Again, built pretty much like a little bit of a mix of a Ford Bronco truck and a Jeep truck of the time. Short wheelbase, ruggedly off road, awesome trucks made to do work. They had things like PTOs and other such things. But today, the Scout brand, I think, went away in the was it the 80s? I want to say it was the 80s. Let me double check that. Actually, I should have just gone there History 101 because it may have explained there. But yeah, there's one of the original International Scouts. Cool little trucks. Short story, real quick, but there's a place up in Tennessee where my family has a vacation home that my grandfather helped his father build. And one of the people that lived down from us in that little home had an International Scout for a long time. It was still sitting there up until, man, I don't even know. I wonder if it's even still there. If it is, it's rusted away, unfortunately, just because of East Coast winters and dealing with the mountains, because it's up in the mountains in East Tennessee. But yeah, here is late 1960. It was a Scout 80 that was born. There's the one that most people recognize with the International Harvester. And there's a real truck, of course. But let's see. Does it tell us when the Scout went away? Here we go. It was 1980. Okay, so I was right. It was October 21st, 1980. That's when this last production Scout went out of the production line, and Scout Motors pretty much went poof. But today they've come back with two new vehicles, kind of digging into their history a little bit, coming up with a pickup truck and an SUV. And the SUV is known as the Traveler, while the pickup truck is known as the Terra. They are names within the history of the Scout brand, though I would have loved to have seen the older Scout names come back, but regardless, really cool. Now, the big news, if you're not familiar with it, is the fact that these two vehicles are technically tied in with Volkswagen a little bit. It's a weird stepchild of sorts. Volkswagen has involvement, but there's nothing truly Volkswagen about the Scout brand. Basically, Volkswagen put money into it, and they're going to be building these vehicles in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And what's amazing, according to Jerry Rig Every Day, is the fact that the parts that they're going to be using on both of these Scouts, both the Terra and the Traveler, are going to be coming from within 500 miles of the plant in Spartanburg. And and you can kind of see the influence here. I don't like these websites where you scroll to play stuff like this. See, it's so weird. Anyway, so you can kind of see where they're playing off the design of the original Scout 80 and the Scout SUV from the 1960s in the front of both the Traveler and the Terra. So that's kind of fun. And actually, the red color you see on the Traveler here is actually a variation on that final Scout 80 that went out in it was a Scout 2. Maybe it was a Scout 2. Anyway, it's a callback to that very final truck going out, and this is the same type of color. I don't remember what they call it. I think it's like a terracotta red or something like that. This blue they showed off with with the Terra truck is a callback to the original Scout 80 truck for sure, because they did mention that during their live stream reveal. And he says it's a base off of the first truck that rolled off the line, which is a blue Scout 80 pickup truck. So this blue is kind of a callback to that. Now, what I do kind of enjoy about the Terra and specifically, I'll get it out eventually, is there are some really interesting features made into just the body of the truck. Let's see if they have a good. Now, if you're wondering, yeah, you can kind of see here. Now, if you're wondering why I'm pulling from the website more than individual pictures, I didn't go to the event, unfortunately. Excuse me, unfortunately. I was stuck here in California because I didn't get the invite and others did. But whatever. I'm bringing it to you now because I want to give my opinion on this thing. I think honestly it's really cool, and there's some really cool features on the Terra specifically. And the one I want to call out to is this little grab handle and a little step here in the back. That I'm surprised I have not seen any other pickup truck manufacturer do something similar to this. At least with a grab handle back here. We've seen people do the back step here. I want to say it was. No, Nissan I think had the step back here on the Titan, but the front step is a little bit on the new side. But the grab handle, I've not seen another manufacturer do that, and I think that's a really smart idea. It gives you something to kind of hold on to and plant onto as you're reaching down into the bed. That's why it's all there, is so you can access the bed without having to pop down the tailgate. Another thing you can see that's going to be common on both trucks are these little tie downs that are made onto the hood. These allow you to tie cargo down that's on the roof. So if you have like some loose luggage or something, you can just tie to these little grab these little handles here on the hood, and they are structurally sound enough to support whatever's on the roof. Let's see what else is there. It's really cool about this Terra. Oh, and now let's go into what's kind of another thing that's kind of common between both vehicles. And here's something interesting. I didn't notice this before, but apparently this is not only showing the range extender, which yes, these are fully EV vehicles. They're fully a battery electric vehicle, and that's their primary motivation is these electric motors at the front and the rear. I'll show you something special about this rear one because I think it's interesting. But the other part is this is the fuel line for a fuel filler to the what are they calling it? The Harvester. That's what it is. They're calling it they're calling it the Harvester. I should remember it's not international because technically it's not. But the Harvester is a little small gasoline engine that's fitted to the very rear of the truck or the SUV, because they both have it, that will allow you to gain another 200 or more miles of range. So you're getting about 300 miles out of the straight battery pack. And then if you need extra mileage, you can do so with the extended range motor. And I think this is a smart idea. Right now, the battery technology isn't quite there for people who are really concerned about it. At the end of the day, when you think about how many miles you actually do, for most people, keep that in mind, most people, 200 miles of range is more than enough to get you from your house to work and back again. Now, bear in mind, you can also still recharge while you're driving. Right now it's only DC fast charging, and the fastest you can do that is typically around 30 minutes. I think most of them around 30, anywhere between 30 and 45 minutes. That's probably about average, considering that there are two different voltage levels that these battery packs run at. I think the most common is 400 still right now, but 800 and above are going to become more common as we develop these battery packs to have more energy density inside of them and shrink their size. But I believe that now Scout didn't say what level this is, if it's a 400 volt battery pack or if it's an 800 volt battery pack. And that matters because that is going to kind of determine how fast you can charge with it, at least with the architecture behind it. You could get a battery pack that's technically smaller but able to use the 800 volt components. But the biggest thing when it comes to charging a battery is heat. The hotter it gets, the slower it's going to charge. So the more heat you can evacuate from the battery pack, the faster you can charge. But there's also a caveat. You don't want to go too cold because then, again, you can drop battery voltage or your recharge rate down again because it's too cold. That's why a lot of battery packs on cars have a precondition mode. You can tell it that you're going to go charge it at a DC fast charger, and the battery pack will become preconditioned so that it's at the optimal temperature to start charging, whether it's hot enough or cold enough. Anyway, so the battery pack itself, according to Scout, will have about 300 miles, maybe a little bit more. And then the range extender is supposed to add another 200 or more. Now, the or more part probably comes down to how often that little motor has to run. Again, that motor. Technical people will get kind of mad at me because the electric parts are motors. This is an internal combustion engine. Now, the other thing that Scout didn't really talk about, and I really wish they would have, is what this engine is. Because bear in mind, these are all still concepts, but according to Scout, that at least that what I've heard, is that the Terra and the Traveler are 85% production ready. I would imagine that probably includes the extended the ER, the extended range motor, but who knows? But there are some good things about this. Like I said, I really wish I knew what type of engine they were using in this. If it's like a 2-cylinder or a 3-cylinder, if you think about it, it doesn't even have to be that big. It just has to be big enough to send a charge to the battery pack. So this could, in all honesty, be something really tiny. It could be a 2-cylinder. It could be a 4-cylinder. It could be a little 3-cylinder. Could even be a rotary, but I doubt it. That's not very fuel efficient, unfortunately. But we do know that it is gasoline powered because Scout said you take it to your gas station and you power it that way. And sorry, I was just checking my stream here, make sure everything's okay. Anyway, yeah, so that's a unique part about this, both the Traveler and the Terra. The other unique thing is, you can see it here, is the fact that it is a full real frame. This is a body-on-frame vehicle. I have certain people kind of argue that, no, this is not a full frame. No, it's a full frame here, people. You know, even though it has a battery pack in here, the frame is what's actually doing the majority of the support. It's not too dissimilar to how you do a retrofit to a degree. You can put the battery pack under the body of a truck, kind of in a similar fashion, if you're doing a full electric conversion where you don't have a motor sitting here, sending a drive shaft out to the rear wheels via a solid axle or independent axle, wherever you have. So in this case, this would be something you could look to as inspiration to do your own EV conversion on a pickup truck or an SUV that has a body on frame. You could do the same thing. Again, the caveat is the motor couldn't be here empowering the wheels with a drive shaft. That would be the biggest thing. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the part that really, I think, shocks a lot of people when they finally realize it. And I'm going to go over to another website, and that's the Utopian. And David Tracy and, gosh, I don't remember the other fellow's name, or lady's name maybe. Hubert Mees. They went to the event, and they actually crawled under this truck, and they noticed that this is, in fact, a real live axle truck. So this the rear axle on the Traveler and the Terra is a real solid axle. And you can tell that mostly because of these here. These are little not flanges. I can't think of the word. Basically, they're structurally tying in the beam part of the axle, which are where your axles are, into the casing. In this case, instead of holding a pumpkin, it holds the motor and the reduction gear. Another part you can see here is it has a Pinard bar. And this one shows you one of the 4 links. Let me go back to the Scout Motors for a second. Now let's just choose the Terra because why not? Let's go back to that image. Oh, too far. It's kind of hard to see on this image, but once you blow it up and actually clean it up a little bit by brightening this up just enough, it's a 4 link. So we have an upper link, a lower link, and a Pinard bar, or Trek bar, or Panhard bar. Depends on who you ask. And they bring up this ZF E-beam axle. I'm pretty sure this isn't this beam axle anyway. But this is typically seen under larger trucks. You can kind of see by the massive bolts here that this is made more for something like a 2500, 3500, bigger trucks like that. So if this is really a ZF axle, it's more likely a smaller version of it, which, being the fact that this is a solid axle, a live axle, if you were, kind of makes doing this a little bit easier in a sense, because once you build this part and this part, it's just finding a way to attach the tubes to the casing. And obviously they have these little finned out pieces going to the axle tubes here. But yeah, that's that. I don't know if it's a ZF, but it's very close. I think Magna also creates an E-axle. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, so they call theirs the E-beam. That's what they call it. Yeah, just accept. So here's their version. Again, theirs is made more for a larger truck. I don't have good images of it, unfortunately. Let's see. Can I open this up? Here we go. This is a much better and much closer image. But again, you can see it's made for a larger truck. It has the axle caps here where you can just pull the axle out without having to tear everything else down. But again, the motor is located within the pumpkin, or which we would traditionally call a pumpkin. Now, in this case, it looks like Magna separates the inverter out, whereas the Scout looks like they include it on the axle. And there is a little bit of a risk of doing this, but considering they have this skid plate right here in front of the axle, there's a tiny bit less risk of something hitting here. It'd be the same issues of having a pumpkin, like with a traditional drive shaft coming out right here. So again, I don't think these are fully production. I think this part might change enough to where they can either they'll rotate it a little bit to give it a little bit more clearance from this end, or they'll probably do something else to kind of help deflect any roots and branches and things like that from potentially hitting what I am thinking is the inverter case. But, and as you can see, the front end is independent. So it's built more like a Bronco than a Jeep, or at least a new Bronco than a Jeep. Excuse me. But it is using a forked lower connection to go to the control arm. So the only thing I could say that's not great about that is by running the drivetrain through here, you could potentially limit just how much travel you can actually put into the Scout. Now, it's not to say you couldn't get more travel out of it. Honestly, it's just a matter of potentially replacing this lower half with something that gives you a little bit more room. Um, but yeah, it's like I said, it's built more like a Bronco than it is a Jeep. A Jeep would have a solid front axle. Oh man, I need that. So they got another shot of the rear. This one might be of the SUV. And there's an oil cooler, as they pointed out earlier. Again, you can see the connection for the Panhard rod. Um, and you can kind of see the welds. Now, again, keep in mind that this is this is pretty much a hand built truck and a hand built SUV. So these parts don't look great for a production vehicle, but again, this is not a production vehicle. It is 85% there. So there's still a lot of this is being hand built. But yeah, I'm really encouraged by this. Now, you're probably wondering why bother? Because if you think about other all electric vehicles, even in the truck and SUV market, they do not use a solid rear axle. They use an independent axle. Rivian does it. I think Ford does it, even though it's based off of a Ford F-150. With the Lightning, I just mentioned, the all-electric F-150. Who else is building a pickup truck right now? Oh, of course, Tesla with the Cybertruck. It's using an independent rear suspension. Why? Why would they want to do a solid axle like this? Like, what is the advantage? In terms of off road, I can tell you what a lot of people like to say there is, and that's as you're doing something like rock crawling or even heavy desert racing, is the fact that one, that axle is very strong. It's very hard to truly mess up a true live axle or solid axle rear axle. Front axles, because you're steering and doing a whole bunch more, you need that control. IRS is enough of a, or IFS is enough of a compromise, but yet still strong enough. The problem, well, excuse me, the other advantage as far as rock crawlers are concerned is that as one axle is being pushed up by a rock, another one is being acted upon the other side. So the other tire is getting pressure, so to speak, as this is going over bumps, so it's moving like that, so it's putting more pressure down this tire too. I don't really believe that in completely, because there are vehicles that do rock crawling without a solid rear axle, and those are UTVs. And there have been two in the King of the Hammers. One I think is driven right now by Jordan Pellegrino, part of Genrite. And there was another one that was built by a group in Australia. There was another one built by a group in Australia, and it's a completely independent front and rear. And it's done. They've done well. They haven't won, like they haven't pulled off a Scott Campbell and won the event with something that's completely radical, but they've been performing pretty well. I think Jordan did pretty well this past King of the Hammers, for what is essentially still a very radical vehicle. Like I said, he's one of two, maybe three. But yeah, oh here, this is kind of nice. They do point out some of the different parts on here because why not? It's here. Looks like it got some night shots. No, I'm not sure what they were getting here, but that's interesting. Oh, he's got a flash. That's what's happening. Because they do this late in the day. If you didn't see it, it was late in the East Coast day. I mean, great for dramatic effect, but not so great for photography as far as like after the event. I'm not sure what that little can is up there, unless that's part of the. That's either part of the motor or part of the gear reduction. I'm not sure what's going on there. That's interesting. Okay, so yeah, they're saying that this is the EV motor then, and then the gearbox comes in and connects to the axles right here. And the other great thing is both front and rear have a true locker. They are electronically controlled, but they are true locking differentials. So another great thing for off road running is having true lockers, because then you're now able to put 100% power to both wheels on both ends. Um, but they do talk about unsprung mass, and that's what a lot of people, when this truck finally came, these two vehicles finally came out, not a lot of people could believe that this is a true solid axle. I heard some people trying to say this is a Don Dion style axle, where it's not quite independent, but not quite solid axle either. So it has a little bit of give, but it's like a swing axle, if I remember correctly. I'm pulling off the top of my head. But yeah, this is something that's kind of important. It's known as a thing known as unsprung weight, and because of where this is located, it is a lot of unsprung weight on the axle. So a lot of people were thinking, yeah, that doesn't make sense. Why would they do that? But as I said, it makes sense from an off-roader kind of standpoint, where you have a really tough axle. And again, if you're into rock crawling, the whole theory behind that. But it does it. But there's a lot of compromises in doing an E axle like this, and one is unsprung weight, but it's also packaging. As you can see, it's a lot of packaging you're putting into the center of the vehicle, and you can kind of see the top of it here. That this is something you have to compensate for, and while it's you have to compensate for that for a traditional uh, live axle, for lack of a better word. There's just so much more going on with an e axle. That's why you kind of see more people do when they do the conversions on their pickup trucks or SUVs or even old hot rods. They'll pull a motor here and put a drive shaft through, because it's an easier package to deal with. Now you have this massive inverter, motor, gearing that's all in the center here that you have to take up with this frame. And the other thing that you have to be concerned with is the fact that this is moving. So, this isn't a still thing. It is, as I've said previously, it's dynamic. It moves. So as this is moving around, this is moving. As your axles are moving, this is also moving. So you have to take that into consideration as the axle rotates around its center, as it goes up and down, and as it goes a little bit forward and backward as it goes through up and down travel. Because it does, even though there's 4 links there and you think solid axle, it shouldn't do anything. But remember, as those links move, everything moves with it. As long as you get the arcs right, it shouldn't move that much, but there is still just that little bit of movement that you have to take care of. Or have to consider. You have to take care of it too, but you have to consider it for the most part. So yeah, that's an interesting choice that Scout has made, and I think it'll ring more with people who are really hardcore in off-roading because of that, because there is a solid rear axle. I know that's not a lot of people on my side don't normally hear it, but once you start getting to the enthusiast side, like you hear that the F-150 has an independent rear axle, you hear the Rivian has an independent rear axle, the first thought most of these people have is that, oh, that's something that can get strained and bind up and break. That's something I don't want happening on the trail. Whereas this, because it's all one movement, there is no. That's the other advantage. Like I said, it's a tough axle, and a lot of the toughness just comes down to the fact that it doesn't really bind in the same way as an independent axle. So there, like I said, there are some neat things, but packaging is the biggest thing that makes doing an e-axle like this on a brand new vehicle kind of unusual, along with that unsprung mass, because that is a lot of mass to have on the axle and moving around dynamically like that. But we'll see. Again, this both the Terra and the Traveler are again allegedly 85% production ready. I don't know what the other 15% is left. I don't know if it's just getting the tooling ready to start building these frames, or if it's something with the the extended range motor they have on the back here, or if it's something else in between, like maybe something with the motors, maybe something with that e-axle. Who knows? But that is allegedly. These vehicles are both allegedly 85% ready vehicles. So hopefully that means that we'll see these very soon. They're talking, what was it? 2027 is the initial target for production. And again, if you're looking at an all electric vehicle, the fact that these are starting below 60,000 is pretty impressive, because I don't know if you've looked at a new truck lately, but I should probably talk about size. Now, a lot of people are comparing the Terra to a Rivian. There are, to be honest, there are a few Rivian people there at Scout Motors, but this isn't the same size as a Rivian. It's actually, from what I've understood, it's actually more in line with an F-150. So if you're concerned, like, oh, this is just going to be a Rivian with a solid axle, no, it's not. This is a proper truck of its own. But anyway, I was saying, if you're just looking at that price, like, wow, under 60,000, that still sounds expensive. Let me show you the price of an F-150 right now. I think you'll be quite shocked if you haven't looked at it. F-150 starts at $37.65, but that is an absolute, that's an absolute base of a base. Actually, I'll tell you what. Well, people know I live here. Let's go. That's close enough. But again, that's the base of a base. That's very bare bones, a two-door pickup. If we compare it to a super cab, you're already starting at over $41,000. I think this doesn't include. Yes, it doesn't include the delivery fee, which I think. Let's see, 5.5-foot bed. Oh, they don't even have a 5.5-foot bed. It's only 6.5 foot. So it is okay. So the Rivian. Bleh. I think the Terra has a 5.5-foot bed rather than a 6.5 foot. So the bed's a little bit shorter than F-150, but regardless, I mean, this is, if we want to go bare bones, nothing else. Oh, I'm actually looking at the wrong one. That's a super cab, not a super crew, which would be a 5.5-foot bed. Yeah, there we go. So still $43,720. So you're already starting. Like I said, that is an XL. That's with nothing in it. What most people are going to be buying are more than likely going to be like an XLT or Lariat. Trimmer, maybe, but more than likely it's going to be one of these two. As you see, XLT, when you start out, you're like around 50, probably going around $51,000, $52,000 when you add in the delivery fee. The Lariat starts at 65, so that's going to be around 66 and a half when you include the destination. And again, there's no incentive here like the Scout has, but I'm not going to include that because that's something you take out in your taxes. It's not something normally that you take out immediately. So walking out the door, I would say the under $60,000 for an all electric truck with, you know, 350 miles of range. That doesn't include the range extender. That price, by the way. Let's see, see if I can go back. So yeah, that $60,000, under 60,000, does not include the range extender. But they don't list. Obviously, they're not going to list what that is with the range extender. Um, but still, I think for a pickup truck and an SUV, something somewhere around these numbers are not bad. You know, it's would I love to see them cheaper, of course, but I would love to see the modern pickup truck much cheaper than what it is right now. Um, so yeah, we'll have to see how these turn out. I really hope Scout really does get something going with these two particular vehicles and keeps growing it as a brand because I think there are things I think they're doing right, things that they're kind of doing wrong. Like I mean, I don't mind the fact that it has the solid rear axle. And it might not be a bad idea at the end of the day, but there are a few things you're compromising with a solid rear axle that maybe they probably should have left for the truck and given the SUV a independent rear axle. But again, at the end of the day, I'm kind of just speaking out. I'm not really basing this off what they know. And I know that the enthusiast market is going to be more than ecstatic with both an SUV and a truck with not only a real frame, but a real quote unquote rear axle by having the live axle in the back. So we'll see. I think there are good things that Scout's doing. There are things that are kind of questionable, but aren't feasible. Are not that are feasible. Things that are probably going to make these things work really well. And one of the big things, of course, like I said, it's being built here in the U.S., built in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And all the parts, according to Jerry Rig Every Day, is within 500 miles of the plant. So it's all stuff that's made here in the U.S. So that's really good for these particular vehicles for the fact that they can get parts pretty easily. They don't have to worry about stuff having to be imported in from China or even Europe. So that's really good. That's really good news for these two trucks.